we'll get into that. But what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say one thing I found interesting, like in watching some of the videos from the LA fires, was seeing like Amazon workers still delivering, or like the Starbucks employees are still being forced to work, and they show the footage of like there was one, it was the Starbucks, people were going in, and then in the hill on the background is just massive fire, and like like what the hell.
I mean, there is some element, I will say, like living in Los Angeles, you do learn to deal with fires. And I think that a lot of us, especially if you're not a rich person, which contrary to what the internet says about me, I'm not a rich person. You have to like get used to it because, you know, there's not, fires break out every single year. We have fire seasons here. We are so used to it only affecting rich people, though, that we are used to being really callous about it. We're kind of like, oh, Malibu's on fire again. Like, fuck them, let them burn. Like, I don't really care. So this is the first time I have seen in a real tangible way, not just like here and there, the fires actually affecting like normal, average working class people. So it does feel extra dystopian because you might have people who are under evacuation orders from their apartment complex, right? And then they have to go into work just fresh, or they have to do, I saw somebody getting grocery delivery at one of their houses on the hills that you had to drive through the fire to get to. You know, it's like this very strange thing. So, you know, I think that it's one of those things like everyday people are not able to escape. And that's new for LA because historically, like the way we dealt with fires is also to like Miley Cyrus's house burns down. She's got a private fire department. Most people don't even know that that's a thing that we have here. All the celebrities here have private firefighters to defend their homes. You know, because if the public firefighters are out there and they see a celebrity's house burning next to just like maybe one weird average middle class house ended up in the mix, or, you know, like worker's house ended up in the mix, not a rich guy's house, right? They will defend the average house and they will tell everybody exactly what they're doing. So like, I had my ex-boyfriend worked retail and his coworker's dad had a house in Malibu, but they weren't rich. They were working class people, right? So their house ended up in a fire zone and the firefighters literally came up to him while he was like hosing his house down, trying to let it not burn. And they were like, just so you know, like your house is our number one priority and we are not going to let your house burn down. And they just like let all of the mansions burn down and every single firefighter just like made sure this one normal house didn't go, you know? So it's like historically there'd been little situations like that, but I think this is the first time in a major way you're seeing these evacuation zones where nobody's a celebrity, nobody is super wealthy. So we are culturally in LA as a culture pretty jaded to the idea of the fires in general, but this is one of those, you know, those like moments where something different happens and everybody kind of wakes up. This is one of those, I think. Like when you have people who earn $30,000 a year needing to evacuate their homes for wildfires and they're like, I live in a shitty apartment complex in Hollywood. Like, what? I don't even own a car. Like, where am I supposed to go? Yeah, that's like, so one of the big things in Central California is that drought combined with irrigation practices, combined with over farming, specifically of cotton in the Central Valley, which is horrible. It's like really, really bad for the workers, for the farmers, for the people who like the farm workers, rather, not like the farm owners, you know, who are actually interacting with it. And people who live in the surrounding areas, they always have to deal with the ramifications of the overwhelming pesticide use that goes into growing and maintaining cotton. But one of the things people don't think about is the water consumption that's necessary. So the combination of climate change and the overgrowth of cotton in the Central Valley literally destroyed one of our biggest lakes. Like it just doesn't exist anymore. Like, so when I was growing up, Tulare Lake existed. Tulare Lake does not exist anymore. It's just not there. And that has a lot to do with drought in California as well. So it's like the combination of those two elements. But more than that, yeah, the LA fires are like the first and foremost thing that we encounter because they happen every year. 2022, I believe, was maybe even worse than this year. It was pretty bad, but they are increasing in severity and like they're just happening in weirder areas. Like there aren't places that are safe anymore from fires. Like it used to be that there were places where you're like, well, this is not a fire zone, I'm going to be okay. And that really doesn't exist anymore in LA.
But as we see now is a firestorm, which is similar to what LA is experiencing. It sounds like LA is having a complex fire. We're seeing those every year now. I was floored when I heard that Hollywood was burning because like Madeline said, like people have this idea that like this is where the celebrities live and it just is not like that.
Yeah, for sure. I want to backtrack here real quick. So Comrade Crazy says, speaking of firefighters, third of them are convicts and are paid $6 to $10 an hour and aren't even any work opportunities after. Yes, and we actually did a video on this.
Yep.
I did an interview with a man named Martise, who was a inmate firefighter, and you can check that out. I'll put the video in the description. They give us a lot of insight on what that life was like. I actually threw up a clip last night, but in that clip, Martise is talking about how like it's the inmates who are doing the firefighting, like the actual firefighters. Like while they're present and they're doing some things, it's mostly like maintenance of the firefighting, while the inmates are the ones actually doing the work. And firefighting, for people who don't know, isn't just spraying a hose. A lot of it is controlling the environment, either chopping down trees or digging trenches, moving mud in order to control the fire's either movement or extinguish it or whatever have you. But go ahead and watch that video. It's very insightful on what they literally have slaves in 2024 2025 doing, and what they're doing now in LA. But anyway, Maddie, so I kind of wanted to bring up and ask, so one of the things we've talked about here on the podcast before is that I think one of what makes our time unique in the struggle, in the class struggle, is that with climate change, which is brought on because of capitalism and imperialism, we sort of face, I would say, a very unique situation where the revolutions of old, the Bolsheviks, the Cubans, Vietnam, like there was much more of a sense of the liberation of the nation, liberation of those people. But now it's almost as if we're at a point where it has to be a liberation for all. It cannot just be like, oh, we've got ours and let's move on. Now, I'm not trying to like say anything like some Trotsky shit and be like, why am I forgetting the concept?
The revolution.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't remember what it's called, but permanent revolution. Thanks. Brain's lagging. So like, I'm not trying to say that, but what I'm saying is that like us here at the heart of the empire, if we can't accomplish what we're seeking to accomplish, like it's spelling out virtually the end of the species if we cannot get it together. I'm just
we truly have an existential threat.
If you're talking to like your tote bag Subaru driving liberal neighbor and you say, well, the elites in power, they're just going to write you off completely. So how do you connect with that person and really make them understand like it is the rich doing this to us, right? Because just saying the rich doesn't seem to land with them either. So I think one of the unique struggles for us as Americans to try to educate people about class and class politics, right, and communism in general, and the dangers and horrors of capitalism with this ticking clock of impending climate crisis. We're already in it, right, of existing climate crisis. I think trying to find the messaging that lands with people, the rhetoric, it's boring. It doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't sound like an important part of the struggle. But I think finding the right rhetoric to draw those people in is actually our greatest struggle and challenge today. And the thing that, if we can figure it out, is going to be super effective at recruiting people. But I don't know how you make it land with a liberal in particular. I think I kind of understand how you make it land with a conservative, but it's like, how do you get that message across to a liberal?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a struggle for even communists sometimes to understand that in so many ways, the liberal is worse than Joe Schmo, who's a conservative. He's not like a Nazi or anything like that, but he thinks he might like some things that Donald Trump says, and he might say some ignorant stuff sometimes, but that person in many cases is a way easier to talk to and relate to than the liberal living in a $400,000, $500,000 McMansion, who is more concerned about getting somebody like Kamala Harris in as president versus, bringing down the system. You had just mentioned to us right before the podcast started that like you were like, yeah, I'm a communist, woo, and then like people kind of either didn't take you seriously or they forgot. And then when you made a video about the DPRK, you were like, oh yeah, I mean, based, and liberals were very, very upset with you about that. So can you walk us through that? Like how did that play out? Because we've had something similar. So
Okay, yeah. So I think that for me, I was really inspired to see on TikTok specifically, on social media everywhere, but especially on TikTok, what seemed to be like a shift in how the public was regarding Palestine and Israel, starting in 2023. I had grown up, obviously, I started getting into socialist literature when I was 13 years old. My cousin's boyfriend when I was a teenager was Palestinian. Now they're married, they have kids. So I knew a little bit about what was going on in Palestine from him. And I was like, oh, I'm going to look into this more. I want to learn about this. And, you learn about it for the first time and you're like, oh my God, this is really fucked up. Like, this is evil. Yeah. This is so deeply evil. And you want to tell everybody. And, you go out into the world and you don't have any reference points for what the world thinks about this because you're young. And you're like, yeah, did you guys know that like Israel is doing ethnic cleansing in Palestine like right now? And it's like really fucking evil and we need to stop it. And then the immediate thing you hear is like, well, that's actually anti-Semitism and it's really complicated and you don't know what you're talking about. And you hear it from everybody, let's talk about other things. And when I got to Korea, and obviously the history of American intervention in Korea, the history of imperialism in Korea from Japan, and then the United States government coming in and in the South, continuing those same imperial colonial models, right? Like in the southern region, committing genocide on Jeju Island, all of these things that happened. The North attempting to liberate the South from our military dictatorship that was murdering people, just to thousands of people being murdered by us. And then us turning around and killing between 1 and 4 to 1 and 5, depending on your source, I always say people in the North, like not soldiers, like people living there. Like we killed 20 to 25% of the population in North Korea. We bombed 80% of their infrastructure. And I'm like, surely if you understand what Israel is doing to Palestine, you understand what the United States has done to Korea. This is the same through thinking. People are going to be ready to hear this. And at first, I think people were, and they sat with it and they were like, whoa. And I saw some people make videos like I was not ready to learn that actually the United States is the ultimate villain and the DPRK, North Korea, is just a very small country that is trying its hardest to survive, being the target of the United States, the biggest military aggressor on the planet, directing all of their political ill will towards them. And they are holding it down pretty well. I think we all can agree. Imagine you have the world's largest superpower threatening you daily, and you still manage to provide free housing, free healthcare, free education, free food when you can. Granted, the famines of the 90s were horrific, but all of these things, they're doing a really good job. Kamala Harris, somebody who I thought used to be my friend, and then we stopped being friends when they became a millionaire, became a landlord, evicted all of their tenants, did all these things. And I'm like, this is antithetical to my entire way of moving through the world. Then that person got very, I think, upset that I was like, oh, this isn't like, I wouldn't do that. That's not what I'm doing, buddy. Like, no. And used it as an opportunity to jump on a bandwagon and be like, well, can you believe that when I worked at this Kollectiv company, they expected me to do labor and work?
Can you imagine?
Equal pay as everybody else who was actually working more than me? And it's like that, you're so detached from reality, you don't know how that looks. Like, anybody with a firm ideology is not going to look at you complaining that you had to do labor to interact in society and be paid the same amount as everybody else doing labor and be on your side. Like it's so deranged. But when you encounter people like that who don't have a strong ideological framework to come from, you see the contradictions in their own life. They see the contradictions in their ideology versus yours. And I think it is, for lack of a better word, very triggering for them. Activism is things that you do with your local community to help make a difference in people's lives. And you can do that. A lot of people do that in our personal lives in small scale. Once I started to get a huge following on the internet, I kind of retreated into that really localized mutual aid type thing. And I found the shortcomings of that. Obviously, you can accomplish more when you are part of a larger organization of people doing things, even if you don't feel you were able to contribute a lot. So if you can join a bigger organization, even if you're like, all I can do is fold leaflets, it's like, well, go just tell them that. Be like, I can fold leaflets for 30 minutes this week. Cool. Awesome. Most people will be okay with that, and it's just like little things you can tangibly do. And here in LA, one of the best examples I've seen of just like, oh, this is actually making a difference in people's communities is there was a commie bookstore that opened up and they started offering free childcare while they were there for everybody in the community. Like, if you got to go do something, we're sitting here anyway. We'll watch your kids. That's totally fine. If you trust us, we'll do it, And like, these are the kinds of things that the Black Panthers used to do, for example. It's like these very material things in people's communities that show like a positive spin on things that are nice. Just we're not reacting or responding to the horrors of the world, because a lot of people, especially liberal people, get burnt out thinking about that, which is upsetting and disturbing, that it's like, oh, you can't be bothered to consider it, you know? But those are the conditions that we're in. So if you find someone who can't be bothered to consider the horrors of the world, but needs someone to watch their kid while they go to a job interview, you can be like, well, you know what? The commies are going to do that for you. That's what the commies are doing for you. So that's going to give you a good name. And like, this is what I think about a lot. Like, if I had the means to do something outside of like what we do at our workplace, for example, which again is very localized. That just helps like 10 of us. That's not widespread change on any level, but it's like a free store in your community. Even if you only work it on Sundays, can do so much. Bringing your neighbor's food that you grew in your garden, that's too much. That's little, right? That's localized. But those are like positive things you could associate with communism that are outside of the people, you know, just talking on our phones on the internet, which I don't want to say is useless, because I think it does expose people to new ideas. But
it's education, it's propaganda. It's
propaganda.
Extremely useful, because, you know, none of us here might be a Vladimir Lenin, but, you know, maybe the Vladimir Lenin of today is currently watching us on TikTok, learning the base information.
I wouldn't say it's useless, you know, either, but it has to become more, you know, and that's one of the things that we're seeking out to do with Kollectiv. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I sometimes just wish I would just wish I could just shake people sometimes and be like, don't you get it? Like, it has to move beyond just Twitter arguments and us doing.
I need you to understand.
Like, sitting alone in a live with no viewers screaming about Comrade Ash. Like, it has to be more than that. You know what I mean? Like,
that's all I do.
You just can't do that. What'd you say, Cruz?
I said that's all I do. It's just anytime Ash does anything, I'm just like, God, fucking damn it.
Well, people do. People don't like our gal. And they don't like me either. And they don't like Madeline either. So I wonder what's the consistent. Hey, well, we like you, so.
We do like you.
You find your people. I mean, I did trick a lot of people into liking me for a long time, and I think that's like a pretty good. Oh, I got some people, and I keep telling people I'm trying to create an alt-left pipeline. You know, I'm like, do you like listening to punk rock music and dyeing your hair? Me too. That's so cool. You know who else would love that? Kim Jong-un. You know?
Right.
Absolutely.
He's got a stick. You know, he's got the fade. He colors his hair purple. It'd be great.
It'd be awesome. Yeah.
I get